Dave Jones here again. We're going to look at another lesson in vibrato this time. This time it's what I would probably call vertical vibrato. If you followed the last lesson on classical vibrato or horizontal vibrato, where your finger moves sideways along the length of the string. This is more like a string bending technique, and I'd probably recommend before you start this lesson, if you haven't already, and if you've never done it before, check out the lesson on string bending. I'll go to a close-up in a minute, but basically your hand position is very much similar to the string bending. In fact, exactly the same, I would say. You've got this pivot point here, like you do with the string bending, and your thumb's over the top, and your hand is going to move exactly in the same way as it does with the string bending. I'm starting off on the D note on the 7th fret of the G string, and my thumb is over the top, and I'm going to pivot my hand around and involve my forearm and wrist, just like we did with the string bending. And what we're doing here is we're playing the note and we're bending it up and then bending it back down again and crossing over where the string wants to rest. Now, one thing I would say about this type of vibrato is it's very important. You can use it once you've experimented with it. You can use what they call small or subtle vibrato, or you can use a wider vibrato, more perhaps a rock technique. But the important thing is, however much vibrato you decide to use or you feel is right when you're practicing or when you're playing, is that you finish up with the string where it wants to rest naturally. Otherwise you're going to end up with an out of tune note. So you're going to bend the string up. So what I'm doing is I'm bending up, coming back to the starting position, down, back to starting position, up. You won't do that when you're actually doing the vibrato. It's just to get your hand used to the movement. So it's okay, so exactly the same movement as for string bending, and depending on how wide you want it, you can experiment for faster vibrato, slower vibrato. You hear singers do this sort of thing with their voices an awful lot, and obviously you can put it into your lead guitar playing, some added interest on a note you might want to finish on or something like that. It just sounds a bit more interesting than just finishing sometimes on just a note. So I'll just move to a close-up and show you that you can use all your fingers for this, and we'll carry on from there. Okay, so here we are, 3rd finger, 7th fret of the G string, the note D. So just get used to that feeling in your hand, pushing up, letting it come back, down, back to where it wants to. Very important, like I say, to let the string rest where it would naturally want to rest. And when you're actually, that's just getting the technique of your hand used to moving. When you actually want to apply the vibrato, you don't necessarily have to do those 3 separate movements that we've shown. It's the idea of just wibbling the note in and out of pitch. So you can try all your fingers. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and the little finger. Generally speaking, I would say this vibrato is probably more common used with your 1st finger and your 3rd finger. But it's a nice little technique and can enhance your lead playing. Okay, yeah, so that's what I would call sort of vertical vibrato. And once you've got it in one position, once you've got the actual movements of the technique, do try it all over the fingerboard, because it a bit like the exercise or the lesson on string bending. There's various different amounts of pressure that you have to apply depending on where you're doing it on the fingerboard. If you're midway between the nut and the bridge, it's going to be slightly easier for you to move the strings up and down than it is, say, if you're down this end of the fingerboard, where it's going to be slightly harder. So it's a good idea for you to practice the technique in all different areas of the fingerboard and on different strings, because obviously on the 1st string, well, it's probably not obvious if you've never done it before, but you tend to have to move the string upwards more in vibrato than you do downwards, because if you move it down, it's going to come off of the fingerboard. So you've lost the note. Whereas, so you can still apply vibrato, to the high E string, or in fact the low E string, but again, the low E string is exactly the opposite. You pull the note downwards rather than, again, if you push it upwards, it comes off the fingerboard and sounds hideous. So you have to experiment in different places. But the wider vibrato, what you would generally do is you wouldn't be able to apply that, for example, on the high E string, not evenly, going up and down evenly, because the string would come off the fingerboard. What you generally find is if someone's going to apply or wants to apply a vibrato, say to that note there, that's an A note on the high E string, what they do if they want to do a wide vibrato is apply it to the same note but in a different position. So you can get that note at the 10th fret on the B string, which is the same note as that note, and you can apply the vibrato there because you can move the string upwards and downwards equally. Having said that, I don't really pay that much attention to until I've decided to do this video to my own vibrato, but I tend to find personally that I pull the string down slightly more than I shove it up. That's probably my poor technique, actually. But it's also more of a sort of a feel thing, vibrato. So try and listen to some of your favourite players who use it and emulate their way of applying it. And you may find in your playing that you tend to push the string upwards slightly more than you pull it downwards. Providing it sounds cool, there's nothing wrong with that at all. The main thing, like I stated, I think it was at the beginning of the video, I might mention this, that the most important thing is when you've applied your vibrato, before the note diminishes and disappears, that you let the string come back naturally to where it wants to rest, and that will then be an in-tune note. So whether you decide wide vibrato or small vibrato for different effects, whether you tend to push upwards slightly more or like me possibly pull downwards slightly more, it really isn't that important, providing it sounds good and the note comes back to rest where it wants to. Okay, so I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you again sometime.